Hey everybody, my name's Chris Weddington and want to welcome you to the Living Stories podcast. Just to give you guys an idea of what it is because it's going to be new to a lot of you. I'm actually changing the name from a previous podcast that we were doing called Stories of Freedom podcast. So it's the same thing, it's under Living Stories. And the reason why we're doing that is because now we are tying this into a ministry through Living Stones Church. So I'm out at the Living Stones Church in Fernley, and part of our new online ministry that we're doing, we're going to go ahead and incorporate this podcast. So it's actually a podcast that I haven't been too active on in a while, so I'm excited to get back into it, and I'm excited to do a different format on it now and invite new people on and get your stories out there. So basically what the Living Stories podcast is, it's a place for believers to come on and talk about their testimony and their story, talk about what God did in their life to where they came to know Christ and they came to become a Christian, or what God is doing in their life currently, or what God has done in their life a certain time, or testimony they want to share. So it's kind of meant for a two-part thing. It's meant to be a outreach program to people who aren't believers, or maybe they're curious and they're kind of looking. So it's an outreach to them. They can come on and hear other people's stories and hear what God's doing in their life, and hopefully somebody has a story on there that can relate to them, and they can kind of hear that story and see themselves in their spot, and that God can. It's another way that God may be able to talk to them and open up their heart. So that's one reason for the podcast. The second purpose would be for Christians to get some encouragement, maybe hear a story that's similar to somebody else's story that they've been witnessing to, where they can say, hey, I can't relate to your story, but this person can. Check this story out. It's kind of another resource to help you reach out to somebody that you might be trying to share Jesus with. And then another aspect is being a Christian is it doesn't really matter what story, any story that I've heard on the podcast, I've been able to relate in some way or another, even if their story is completely different than mine. In fact, I grew up in church, and I never really strayed completely away from church. So there's a lot of stories that I hear that I can't relate to completely, but there is some part in that story that God showed them or talked to them that I can definitely relate. So with that being said, part of the podcast is meant for you to be able to get something out of it also as a Christian and whatnot. So anyway, I'm excited to get this started. You're going to hear some references. If you go back and listen to the old ones, we call it Stories of Freedom, and now it's Living Stories. There was a lot of growing pains at the beginning, so if you listen to the first ones, there was technical issues, there was different things that we tried that didn't work out, and whatnot. But either way, there's some good stories, and that's why I decided to leave them there and let you go back and listen to them. Just know that they're going to be called Stories of Freedom podcast, and this one now is Living Stories, and there's going to be a new format with it, and everything's going to be done online over Zoom. We're going to have it posted on the Living Stones Fernley YouTube page for you guys to watch afterwards, and we're also going to have the audio on your favorite podcast platform under Living Stories. So you can listen to it, you can watch it, you can share it. We're going to have little snippets every podcast that we'll share as well. And also we're on Facebook, so I haven't updated that page yet. But anyway, just wanted to give everybody a background of what the podcast was, the direction that we're going, and that way going into this episode where we talk to Tim, you have a little bit of a background and you know what this is. So all right, guys, I hope you guys enjoy and that you get blessed through this story. Welcome, everybody, to the Living Stories podcast. This is first one under that name, and we've got Tim Abina
What's
here
up?
with us. How you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing, man?
Good, man. We've been trying to do this for a while, and we already did one, but my computer crashed, so.
Yeah, I'm still a little spiteful because of that.
well,
So,
well, here we are. So now we get to do it again, and first one under the new name. So that's cool. That's exciting.
yeah, that is awesome.
All right. Well, just like last time, I mean, I guess just go ahead and start. Let everybody know your story, your testimony, and if I got something to say, I'll jump in. Otherwise, I'm sure I'll have questions or things at the end.
No problem. So I think one of the things we can talk about first before I jump into my story
Hmm.
is like you were just saying, you've been doing the stories of freedom for a little while now,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
I did it. I started it in January of 2018, so a little over 2 years ago. And we were doing one, me and Kayla for we were doing, which was a lady at the other church that we were going to down in Gardnerville. We were doing about one every other week after church. And so in that year that we did it, we had probably a little over 20 episodes recorded, and then kind of just it phased off after that, just because we started looking for a home. Her schedule wasn't really lining up with that. Both of our schedules weren't lining up anymore on Sundays as much, so we it kind of phased out and just haven't really started it since. So
Well, there you go. And then
yeah,
I think one thing that's awesome is just like people's testimony. It's not just for ourselves; it's for others too. And
yeah,
that's really hit home for me in the last. I think in the last few weeks since this COVID-19
yeah, yeah.
crisis kind of came in, I'm just listening to people's testimonies, what God's doing during this time of isolation and quarantine, and just being really like I feel really like filled up by the Holy Spirit listening to some of the stories from our church. We're from Livingstone's churches.
Hmm.
We're the church in Fernley. This is where
Hmm.
me and Chris are from right now.
Yeah,
But it's just a whole new season right now. But I felt a lot of comfort just listening to a lot of different testimonies going on right now. So I'm just hoping that this would be fruitful, and that people listening to this could just they can relate with even some of the struggles that people have gone through,
yeah.
and also how Christ has just really shown himself in people's lives. There's like this one saying, um, oh, I can't even remember the quote or who it's from, so don't cite me, but it's when someone's at the end of the rope is usually where God is the one that's about to catch you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was my story, and I'll kind of lead into that. So for my story, I'll go back to the very beginning. I didn't grow up in a Christian household whatsoever. It was kind of a broken household. My dad's father was abusive. My mom's relationship with her parents were kind of all over the place too. And I think that's just that legacy kind of came down, to the next generation, to the next
Mm.
generation. So I had a lot of turmoil
Yeah.
growing up. Um, so I was my father. And before I get started, I did this last time. I wanted to get this going too, especially because it's going to be on our church page, and it's going to be kind of mainstream where people can hear it. But so if any of my family are listening to this, I just want to quote Romans 8:1, which is there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ. So though our past can be fickle, and our past can be dirty, and our past can be we can feel a lot of guilt from our past.
Hmm.
There's no condemnation for those who are in Christ. And my story moving forward outside of that dark time is God has reconciled my family in such a unique and beautiful way. And I just want them to have that encouragement that the things that we're going to be talking about, it's not to condemn them whatsoever, but just to
Mm.
show how Christ really found me, but also found my family in all this too. So
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad now, because the last one I knew your sister, but I didn't know your parents, and I've gotten to meet your parents since then, and talked
yeah,
to them a couple of times, and they're great people. So
yeah,
definitely, and obviously your sister, she's great. She's got her ministry she does that Renee's been doing too. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'll
yeah.
just
It's
dive right in.
what's that?
I said I'll dive right in. Can you hear
Yeah,
me
go for
okay?
it. I
Okay,
can, yeah. Hang on one second. Never mind. All right. Sorry. Go for it.
okay. Yeah, so like I said, I grew up not in a Christian household. Um, my parents were just really, I would say, involved with themselves and their own dynamic in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, there's, I would say a little bit of neglect on kind of raising me up in a, I would say, in a better way, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I got into a lot of trouble. I had a lot of freedom. I had a lot of freedom growing up, so I was able to do a whole lot of things. But at a young age, like I said, my dad was verbally and sometimes physically abusive to my mother. My mother would at times she would be more demeaning towards me. Um, so I grew this resentment and anger, a lot of resentment and a lot of anger. And my sanctuary was kind of my cousins' homes outside of the chaos of my family,
Mm-hmm.
of my my immediate family. And in that, that's where I was sexually assaulted. I was sexually abused by an older cousin. And I mean, if you can imagine, it really twisted
Mm-hmm.
me up inside. And so from that, and that went on, and I want to say until I was like probably 9 years old or something like that, maybe 10. And so that really just I really just went downhill from there. I got into a lot of drugs. As soon as I could get a hold of it, I got a hold of it. I was trying to numb what I was feeling. And then in middle school, I just got really, really into that drugs. You can name it. I did it.
Mm-hmm.
um, and my story moving forward throughout middle school, because I was just a really dark kid, I got into a relationship with my wife now, which is awesome, Christina. So we met when we were, I think she was 13 and I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
She might have been younger. And so we've been together for 16 or 17 years now. But she's dealt with a lot of crap, a lot of crap. So same thing, like I was talking to you in the beginning, this legacy was continuing. So I found myself doing the exact same things my father did, with just jealousy, um, verbal abuse, and it was leading to some kind of physical abuse, just because I was just an angry kid.
Mm-hmm.
Angry. I'm at 13 years old, first relationship. I'm at head over heels. I loved her, but I was twisted, and I didn't really know what love was.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the one. Christina was the first one that actually introduced me to the gospel, but I was the biggest critic. She
Mm-hmm.
was just, she would be like talking to me about it. I'm like, no, 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 no. Um, and for the longest time, because I liked her, obviously I liked her a lot. I just started to pretend, in a sense. So I pretended that I was a Christian. I pretended, just for her. And about I think junior year, that's where my life really just started to slip away. The alcohol, the drugs, just everything that was going in my life I was in the spiral, kind of going down. And she had enough. She had enough in middle school. She was like, or not middle school, junior year, might have
Mm-hmm.
been between sophomore and junior year, I can't remember, where she broke up with me. I lost one of my good friends. He died, tragic. It was I can't remember exactly what it was. It was a heart disease. Something happened.
Oh wow.
He was 16 where he died. And so it
Wow.
was, everything kind of came to a head at one point. And for the longest time, I always knew, in a sense, growing up, that I was going to commit suicide.
Mm.
I had this a box of pills that I collected, and I'm just to give you a kind of a invitation to the brain of how I functioned then. It was just dark, and I figured that was always going to be the way I was going to go out, and it was just a matter of time on the circumstances around me, for me to actually pull the trigger on that. And so after she left me, my friend died. And I was just dealing with a lot of that guilt, resentment, and just the gross feelings I felt from just the sexual abuse, and everything like that. And I felt like it was the only really way out. So I took the pills one night. I blacked out,
Wow.
and I woke up. Um, I remember just glimpses of waking up in the hospital because they pumped me out, and then I blacked out again, and then I was in West Hills Correctional Facility. And there is really where the story comes to a head. That's where I met a guy named Dan. I don't remember his last name, but awesome guy. And he would he really told me the gospel, and I heard it for the first time.
Yeah.
I heard it for the first time, and I remember just feeling all this dread, all this anger, and this these gross feelings within my heart. And I was laying in bed, and I remember asking God, I remember asking God, like, if you're real, you need to. Basically, kind of called him out. I was like, you need to show me
Mm-hmm.
that you're real. You need to show me something. And that night, I fell asleep, had this crazy dream, and I don't know if it was part of the medication they were giving me, or, but it was a crazy dream. It felt real, and the dream kind of, and I could just kind of sum it up. I was basically in a waiting room. I
Mm-hmm.
was sitting down in a waiting room. It was like a white waiting room, and there was a door on my right hand side. And I remember I stood up in the dream, and I start walking towards the door, and then the lights turned off, and it was pitch black. And I heard all these people kind of chattering
Mm-hmm.
around me, and they were kind of like accusing me of a bunch of different things. And I remember just having this fear, like deep fear. I'm like, I don't belong here. So I opened up the door, and I saw this kind of the city of light, the city of light. And and this is, I haven't even picked up the Bible once at this time. Now looking back at it, I can see where like Revelation's new earth and new heaven come into place with this dream. And I'm always just blown away by this. But in this dream, going back, there was my family. My family was standing in front of the city. And I remember before I fell asleep that night, I hated everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I just hated everyone. But in that dream, I just felt this deep compassion and love for my family. And I remember just embracing them, weeping, just weeping. And then I woke up from that dream with like my heart was changed.
Mm-hmm.
I felt different. I felt like, all right, Jesus is real. And like I have to give my life to Jesus. I told Dan that. I was like, Jesus is real. Like, this is it. Like, gotta give my life to him. And with that said, that really put me on the trajectory of following Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
kind of seeking out who he is in my life. But like we said, I'm going to keep referring back to our last podcast since you deleted it.
I didn't delete it.
But like I said, that wasn't the end of the story, right?
Yeah.
Like, I got that first understanding of Jesus. R.C. Sproul talks about this,
Mm-hmm.
that there's like two conversions. Bear with me. So
Yeah.
the first conversion would be like the intimate understanding of who Jesus is. Like, I see Jesus and I want to have a relationship with him.
Uh-huh.
And then it can fall. You really can fall flat at that point because you don't
Yeah.
dive any deeper. Like,
Right.
but who is he? Like,
Yeah.
what does he say? What does the Bible say about him? So from that, I kind of went to that generic Christian walk with
Uh-huh.
just knowing of Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not knowing him intimately.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, like, regardless, we're gonna have struggles no matter what. But my first, I think, the second. So R.C. Sproul. Let me go back a little bit. R.C. Sproul talks about the second conversion, about it's the understanding that you want to know Jesus more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to know him more intimately. You want to know who he is, what he says, what he's done. You want to start eating everything from the
Yeah.
word, right? Understanding who he is.
Yeah.
On top of that intimacy. And so I think a lot of us we might, not everyone goes through that journey, like
Hmm.
where there's a first conversion and a second conversion. I hate even saying that because that's not the reality behind it, but
I know what you're talking about, though. I mean,
yeah,
you see that a lot. You see people, when you first give your life to Christ, or people first give their life to Christ, they're real excited, but you also see that not everything's quite, click. They've got a lot to learn. They've got a lot of growing, and that's also where like you get go to conferences and stuff, and I think people will give their life to Christ, and then like you said, you've got to I forget how you worded it, but basically, you've got to there's nothing real deep there yet, so people fall flat, I think is what you said, and you
yeah.
see that, so you got to grasp onto that like right then, and well, I know what you're saying, and then later on, then you kind of hit that moment where it becomes more real, and you start diving in a
Yeah,
lot more.
it's like what in Hebrews it talks about. We're not there yet. So we are going through the sermon series in
Yeah.
Hebrews, so we're going to get there. But he talks about spiritual milk, right?
Uh-huh.
Like some of us are still on that spiritual milk, where we're the infant stage. Like
Yeah.
we just need the milk. The writer of Hebrews starts to talk about like there's still food that you need
Yeah.
to eat too. Like
Yeah.
and that's kind of where it was. Like when you first are, when you first have that encounter with Jesus, you're on the bottle. That's okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you don't want to stay on the bottle, if
No.
that makes sense either. Like there is a growth process
Yeah.
to following Jesus too. So you're on the bottle, but then you go to soft foods, and then you go to heartier foods, and
Yeah.
then at the end of the day, when you finally die, you go to Him, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. And just like life, it continues to, progress,
exactly.
Yeah.
So with that, that I would say that's the original
Hmm.
kind of my conversion story, but it's all
Yeah.
led to walking more deeper with Jesus, walking more intimately with Him.
Hmm.
I met me and Christina, which is awesome. So it's kind of um, what am I trying to say? The reality behind that is, Christina and me got married, so
Hmm.
we got back together. I would say maybe a year after the whole situation where I had my conversion with Jesus. And we've been together ever since. We've been happy. We've had our downs and
Yeah.
lows and stuff like that. But I think one of the things that I'm learning just in this whole COVID-19 reality, being isolated and everything like that, is just realizing that I still have to look back to the past to look to the future, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. It's kind of like what it says in Exodus, right? Like the Israelites, God always calls the Israelites, like, look back at what I did so you
Yeah.
can move forward.
Yeah.
Don't look back and dwell,
Right. Right.
right? But look back to see what I've done so you can keep moving forward. And
Yeah.
I have to keep putting that in my head, like, yeah, there's some tragedy in my growing up, but God did something to bring me all the way up to this point.
Yeah.
It's kind of a crazy thing.
Yeah.
God works in all of our lives,
Hmm.
and He gives you a joy that is, that's supernatural, and it doesn't come from you. And that's that's what we're really trying to hold on, especially in this time where we're just kind of like, oh, I'm at home, I'm going crazy, but
Yeah.
God is good, and He's going to keep pushing us forward. I had to keep reminding myself. Me and Christina sat down the other night, and so here's another little what God's kind of doing right now for me, like
Hmm.
testimony, is that just reminding of how we even came about here in Fernley, right? Like
Yeah.
I went to Livingstone 6 years ago, and that's where I really just started to really develop the meat and understanding who Jesus is, and what the gospel says, what the Bible says about who He
Hmm.
is. Um, and I remember I sat down with Pastor Kyle. I think you've met Kyle Bateson from the Reno Church.
I probably have. I know there's been a lot of guest speakers, and unless they've come a couple of times, I don't, I'll recognize them when I see them, but I couldn't put a face to the name.
Yeah, he's not that great. Anyways, um, no, I love him. Uh, so ever since I got out of West Hills, I felt this call to minister,
Uh-huh.
to evangelize, to go out and share the good news of who Jesus is, because he dramatically changed my heart in one night. And it was a pretty dramatic thing. So the first thing I did was, I just preached to my parents. I was preaching to my parents,
Nice.
preached to my family, and God's so good and he's so sovereign. He brought our family to just a healthier place,
Yeah.
which is amazing. And
Yeah.
from that, I still knew moving forward, I wanted to preach the word. I wanted to share the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally showed up at Livingstone's, and I remember sat down with Kyle for some coffee, and I was like, "Hey, I want to be a pastor." And I literally just met this guy. He probably thought I was completely crazy. I'm completely nuts. Like, I want to share the gospel. He's like, "Okay, crazy." No, but I remember what he told me. He was like, "Hey, I think you're a church planter," and I laughed. I'm like, "No, not a church planter at all." But as I kind of followed Kyle and kind of was led by the Holy Spirit, I got this crazy idea of planting a church in Fernley, and from that I let Christina know, and she laughed at me. She's like, "No, we ain't going to Fernley."
Yeah.
So 2 years we were praying about coming out here, and finally Christina just kind of showed up. She actually drove out to Fernley and stepped into our house. You've heard this story, but
Yeah. That's pretty
she was in
funny.
our house and she called me up, and I'm in Sparks, where we originally lived. And she's just like, "Hey, I'm standing in our new home." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "I'm out here in Fernley." I'm like, "What the?"
That's funny.
Yeah. So moral of the story is never tell God you're not going to do something.
Yeah.
Because I lived out here, or I worked out here in Fernley for 10 years
Uh,
as a printer. And when I quit and left Fernley, I was like, I ain't never coming back here. I
mm.
told God that. I was like, I'm not coming back to Fernley. You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny about that? Like me and Renee, we love the coast. Like that's our goal. Like we love the ocean, and specifically like more like Northern California or even Oregon coast, like that area, redwoods, like that sort of thing. Like we like life, water, trees, that sort of thing. And I used to travel around with one of the companies I worked with, and doing wind farms, and we'd always go somewhere where it was hot and windy in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere. And I told Renee, I'm like, we're never living in the desert. Like whatever happens after I get done with this apprenticeship, we're never living in the desert. And she's like, I agree. And then here we are in Fernley, and it's, we started off in Gardnerville when we moved to Nevada, and it was like, okay, we're still close to Tahoe. It doesn't, there's still some greenery around here. It's not too bad. And then we come out here and it's like, yeah, this is definitely the desert, the high desert,
Yeah,
but
you're
it's,
in the desert.
but you know what? It's not that bad. I mean, like
It's not.
we actually like it here in Fernley, more than we anticipated. The first time we drove into town to check it out, we drove in and we drove right out. We're like, nope, we didn't even stop anywhere. We're like, we're not doing Fernley. And then here we are. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
funny. Never tell God you're not gonna do something.
yeah, yeah,
That's the first sign where you're like, if it ever slips out of your mouth, like, no, God, I'm not doing that. You gotta do that.
yeah.
Oh no,
Here
I'm
you are.
sorry. Never. Here we are. Yeah, but yeah, we fell in love with Fernley. I mean, the first year was tough,
Yeah,
moving out here, because when we moved out here, it was just me and Christina and the kids, and it was a grind. We didn't know anybody.
yeah.
And so we just had this idea of like, hey, like God moved us out here um, for a church to possibly,
Yeah,
Livingstones to be planted out here. But the first year was a grind, and I was, there's a couple times in the midst of it we were just like, man, maybe this wasn't what was supposed to happen. There's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of turmoil just between me and Christina when we first moved out here.
yeah,
Um, but now that we get to see this beautiful thing that's
yeah,
unfolded, um, we're I mean, we're only 8 months into planting the church,
yeah,
launching the church, but how it's all came to be is its own other story that, maybe that'll be for another podcast. But
Yeah, it's been cool to see because when Renee and I first went, when it was still Journey, and it was right before the school season or the school started, so we were in that other area, and it
yeah,
was, I guess it was one of the first weeks that you guys had started coming. I don't know, right? I mean, it's what it sounded like anyway. But either way,
yeah,
that church was down to like 14, 15 people. There wasn't very many people there, and to watch how much it's grown, it's been
yeah.
pretty
It
cool.
was. Yeah, I'm trying to think. When you were first there, I think we were in the we were in the no, we weren't in the gym. We were in the
No.
cafeteria.
Yeah, cafeteria, yep.
Cafeteria. So I think that was maybe three. Me and Christina were attending there for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And at that point, when we first got into there, it was like I was just facilitating,
Mhm.
like, hey, this is, here's some ideas. Here's what you should do. Here's what you shouldn't do. I was just kind of facilitating everything
Yeah,
at that point until like a partnership happened,
yeah,
but it just blossomed
yeah,
into, so, and I wouldn't say everything was beautiful,
yeah,
but like not, it was a struggle. I mean, you can imagine two churches coming together,
yeah.
um, different philosophies or different ideas
Mhm.
or, whatever like that. But the main goal in it was to make sure that, Northern Nevada is one of the most secular, or Nevada itself is one of the most
Mhm.
secular
Yeah.
states in the United States. So there's less churches here, um, or less gospel preaching
Yeah.
churches here. Fernley is a big area where there's less gospel speaking preaching churches.
Mhm.
So the last thing we wanted to see for Livingstones is another church to go under. So
Yeah.
the whole goal in entering this was, all right, how do we help? How do we help this church thrive? And it ended up just kind of snowballing into, okay, this is going to be a Livingstones.
Yeah.
Um, but well, I mean, it was all God,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we were really tippy toeing. We were just like, I'm not sure, we'll see. And
Yeah.
then God was just kind of like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. And here we are.
Yeah. It's
And here
it's
we are.
yeah, and I think it came at a good time. I mean, Fernley definitely needs a church like this. I mean, we really liked our church in Gardnerville, and well, they were in Minden by the time we left, but it was a great church, and we enjoyed we loved the people there. We loved um, we just love that church, and we moved out here, and Oscar. I work with him, and I was asking,
Oscar.
yeah, I was asking him. I'm like, hey, do you know any good churches out there? He's like, no, there's not really many good ones, Or I mean, it's not that they're not good, but it wasn't, it just didn't. They were having a hard time finding one that fit. So
Yeah.
so we came out here and we were a little discouraged. That was one of our biggest concerns, is hopefully we can find a church, that we can grow in and stuff. And we found one that we started going to, and we liked it, and we're like, this will do, kind of like mentality, like this is all right, this will work. And then Renee's like, I want to try some more. And then we ended up going to, well, again, it was Journey at the time, and just seeing, it was just like when we walked in that first week, it was like, okay, this is more the direction of what, like, this feels more like it, even though it sounds funny because there wasn't much there at the time, because there wasn't
Yeah.
many people there and stuff, but we're like, this is more of like the church home that we're looking for, and we know it's going to grow. And it has grown, and it's a great, we've loved it. So
Yeah.
definitely
And
this community needs that church. So
well, that's one of the things I'm excited about, is just watching the church grow,
mhm.
but not just grow in numbers, but grow in depth
Yes,
of
yeah,
the people. I think that's one thing that, people or even pastors or church planners can miss, is like, oh, I gotta, we gotta make sure that like 50 people show, 100 people, 200,
yeah,
5,000. But Jesus never was there for the
no,
crowd. He was there, he had his 12 ragtag
yeah,
guys that he trained up to send out. And so that's kind of the heartbeat of who Livingstones is
yeah,
we want, not just, obviously we want a lot of people to come and know God,
mhm,
um, but just knowing God, or about God, right? Like in the beginning of this podcast,
mhm,
that that doesn't keep you moving forward.
right,
Like there's that depth. So we want to be a church that expands, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
grows deeper in our understanding of who
Yeah,
Jesus is.
exactly.
And that's the fundamental thing that's going to have people go out
Yep.
and preach the gospel to their neighbors, to their brothers and sisters, to their everyone in their arena. That's where another thing that I think the church could possibly go wrong is it's all about the Sunday. It's all about Sunday, 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 Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But Sunday's not the big game, right? That's the mentality of the American, is like, hey, Sunday's the big game. This is where I go in. This is where I check the box.
Yeah.
But Sunday's just the huddle. The big game is actually Monday,
Yep.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yep.
And that's what we want to be, is to equip the body and send them out,
Yeah.
because that's how people know Jesus. It's not just Sunday.
Right. Yep. Exactly. All
But
right.
yeah, man, sweet. What else do you want to talk about? How long have we been on here? I'll
I
keep
don't
going.
know. What is it?
It's only 40. Man, we killed that in, this is like 35 minutes.
Wow. And yeah, and we talked about other things other than just your testimony. Last time it was like an
Yeah.
hour and a half, right? At
Yeah,
least.
I wanted to go quickly over my testimony, but going back to my testimony, if there are people out there that are listening that, that have gone through physical abuse, sexual abuse, things like that, I would just encourage you that keeping it in and not sharing it with a brother or sister, right? The gospel says, cast your burdens on one another so we can lift you up. If we keep it in, it's poison.
Mhm.
It's poison in your soul. And the gospel says you need to bring light to some of those things. And so if you are or have gone through sexual abuse or physical abuse or, drug addiction, things like that, it's really a call to share your sufferings with your brothers and sisters so that they can, that we can rally around and comfort you and preach the gospel to you. Preach like Jesus. Jesus met me where I was at. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to tie my own shoes. I didn't have to lift myself up. I didn't have to be a perfect person. Jesus came, and he came for me. He came and met with me.
Mhm.
And so just sorry, my kid just
That's
walked in.
okay.
He's telling me about his boo boo.
It's
Go
all
lay
right.
down. No, okay. But go find mommy, bud. Anyways, but yeah. So that I just say that encouragement, because I think that a lot of people, we want to keep it down or bury it or not even talk about it. But just like David did in Psalms, he shared his emotions with God, even though some of them are ugly, even though some of them are like sometimes David's screaming out in fear, sometimes he's screaming out in anger, sometimes he's screaming out in sorrow and sadness.
Mhm.
And that's how we can approach God with our sufferings and know that, he's endured. That's why he was on, the cross. That's why we look to the cross, is that he took it all. There's nothing we have to do to earn our way salvation. There's no perfect people. And if you're looking for a perfect church, go somewhere else, because we won't be that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what we want to do is just have our arms open, as people of God. We want to have our arms open and to receive you just as Jesus received us. And that's what our testimonies are. It's just acknowledging that Jesus came to us. We didn't have to do nothing.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like that. So
there's that encouragement right there.
yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
I like looking at your face, man. COVID-19.
yeah.
COVID-19. Yeah.
COVID-19 is crazy. So, I mean, everything's switching over to this, and it works actually good because now we've got a format where it's not just audio, it's video also. So, I mean, that's one thing that's coming out of this is we're using, getting more familiar with the technology and stuff.
Yeah, it took me a little while there in the beginning of all this, is just getting used to the technology. I realized there's a lot more work to it
Yeah.
than I thought. There's a lot more work to just being all online and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm encouraged that one day that we're all going to be able to be together
Yeah.
again. And,
Looking forward to that.
yeah.
Yeah. We were just talking about that. Me and Renee earlier today, talking about how, it's different being online than being in person, and, looking forward to seeing everybody again in person and being able to meet in person and
Having
things like that.
meals together and hanging
Yeah.
out, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much longer this is going to be, but this is the reality, and we all believe that God is sovereign,
Mm-hmm.
and that this is just a special, unique time that God's calling us into
Yeah.
right now, which is nuts too, because for a fresh new church planter planting a church to be thrown into a pandemic. Pandemic that hasn't been around for over, like 100 years. We haven't had a pandemic.
Yeah.
So I'm adapting and I'm trying to learn too. But I think what God's even showing me right now is just how much I don't have control.
Yeah.
Like have all these plans laid out. I'm like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, we're going to do all these things. And then God's like, well, no, I don't think we're going to do that. I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever, man.
Yeah. 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 And you were saying that now that we're doing it online, there's quite a bit of more people than, I mean, there's the attendance level of people online is growing, right? And there's like you're getting good numbers out of that.
Yeah, that's what's been kind of crazy too, is
Yeah.
that we were in a steady amount of people, coming to church for a
Mm-hmm.
little while. COVID-19 in the beginning weeks of March start kind of, people start getting worried about coming to church and things like that. And once we went full on online, I noticed, because I get to look at the analytics and check out the numbers of people coming in and checking out our services. It's been pretty phenomenal. Like, we've had a great growth in just viewers. Some people are from California, some people are from Nevada, some people are from, I think, like Utah or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So we have like different people from different states that are
That's
actually
cool.
tuning in, which is pretty amazing too. But like this, this crisis, though it's, there's seriousness to it and things like that, but God's using it for good too. Like, people that wouldn't have normally come to church, walk into a building, are now actually, hey, now I can sit at home and I can look, I can look on and kind of investigate this way. And maybe that's a cool way that God's going to use to bring people to the church. But it can't be a lasting thing. That's the thing. People that are checking out the church online, it's cool that they're checking it out, but at the same time, we are embodied souls that need to be around other brothers and sisters. And that just watching online it's never gonna be enough. It won't be enough, but we actually have to, what does it say? Don't forsake the saints, right? And the gatherings. So eventually, when this all kind of dies out, I'm hoping that we're all going to just run together. I'll be preaching that. I'll be preaching that day, and I'll probably cry, and you won't be able to understand me the whole time I'm preaching. I'll just be like, oh, but I'm excited. My heart is really looking for that future day. But I'm also excited right now too. Like, I think that we are reaching a lot of different people, maybe even different demographics. And we're having to really just evolve the way we're doing church. Like, we have to just kind of, like we were talking before, the church isn't all about Sunday, and this is like a big reality. I'm like, no, the church isn't about Sunday.
No.
Are the people of God going out and being mobile? Like, are we actually being the church, not attending the church? Because there's a huge difference. Being the church goes out on mission, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbors as yourself. That's being the church. And that God's redirecting that into not just attending, because that's all it was. We were only meeting at a middle school in the middle of the desert. But literally, that's all it was, a middle school in the middle of the desert. Wherever we're assembled, wherever we're together, that's the church. So how
Yeah.
are we, and that's kind of the charge that we're, that's the main charge that I've been really pushing on our congregation, on our people, is be the church.
Yeah.
This is the time that we're be the church and go out, serve. And when I say go out, because people are like, well, what do you mean go out? We're locked inside. I'm like, well, there's other ways,
Yeah.
to be the church. But at the same time, there are times where we see this all throughout church history that Christians they go out regardless of the circumstances around them. Think of Martin Luther during, what was it, the bubonic plague. Um, they were, I mean, we're talking about millions of people dying, bubonic plague during that time with
Yeah.
Martin Luther. That was like a 90% death rate.
Jeez.
Uh, and Martin Luther is going into these homes, no mask, no nothing. And he's ministering to people, he's preaching for people, and he's serving people, he's giving meals to people. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, that's what the Christian's called to do. Despite our circumstances, we have a hope in something else,
Yeah.
that we can march forward with courage and joy and boldness, knowing that if I, what is it, to live, what's that? Oh gosh, it's fleeting my head right now. To live is Christ, to die
Mm.
is gain.
Yeah.
That's really the heartbeat. What does it mean to do that? And it's like, hey, like if I have to go out to minister to someone, I'm
Uh-huh.
going to do it.
Yeah.
And God's sovereign. He's going to either protect me or he's not going to do it. Obviously, I'm going to do that with, I'm going to be cautious and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm wearing gloves. Just to let you guys all know, I'm wearing gloves and I have a mask and I
Yeah,
go
all
out.
that's, yeah.
I have small kids at home too, and my wife's a nurse too,
Yeah.
so we're taking a lot of precautions
Yeah.
and keeping our family safe and making sure people that we're in contact is
Yeah.
safe. But it's still, the charge is still the same. It's always been the same, despite the circumstances, that we go and preach the gospel to
Yeah.
everyone wants to hear it.
Yeah.
And that's the heartbeat, man. That's the
Yeah.
heartbeat.
I do have to say, in this time, I've been really happy to see how connected, like, our community group still is in the church. Like, you know, um, it's like you said, it's not, Sunday isn't just the day. I mean, like, the and going into this time, we've been able to see basically what it's like when we step out of the church and, or, going to the middle school. I mean,
Yeah.
we're it's not about the building, it's about the people. And I think the people in our community group that we have done a really good job of staying connected. I mean, there's every day there's stuff going on our chat group and stuff like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
prayer requests, things like that, praises, and people just talking to each other. And even like Randy wanting to connect on Call of Duty, right? I mean, it's just trying to connect with everybody, and I think it's a great thing being able to see that. I was actually talking to one of the guys at my work that goes to Summit Church out in
Yeah.
Reno somewhere, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he was saying that I was telling him how our college group, and I was like, it's actually working pretty well, doing it on Zoom. And he goes, well, not the college group, I'm sorry, the community group. And he's like, the community group's probably fine with adults, but try working with the youth group on Zoom. It's not so easy. He's like, they're just a bunch of teenagers, and they're stuck in a house, so they're just kind of rambunctious when they get on the Zoom, and I can't reel them in because they're I'm not there. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that would be a little difficult, wouldn't it?
That's what I'm saying, man. Call of Duty Ministry is going to help that all out. Call of Duty Ministry, gaming,
Yeah.
game and chat about God as you're shooting Nazis.
Yeah, there you go. Doing the Lord's work,
Doing the Lord's work. Yep. Yeah. Hey, I'm not dismissing it yet.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, with Randy. But I agree. I think our community group's doing really well, staying close together, communicating with each other,
yeah.
and being vulnerable too. I think,
Yes. Very much.
especially during this time. I know I keep saying that during this time. Um, I kind of want to get out of that because the reality behind it is this time has
Mhm.
only revealed really our heart's fears, our heart's desires, and our heart's the true heart. It's always been there. This
Mhm.
fear of going out, or this fear of disease, or just a fear of death in general, or even a fear of being alone by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just been that it's been a reality. Like all COVID-19 has just been like, hey, this is how you've been feeling
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, but you've had so many distractions,
Yeah.
so many distractions in life. Now all these things are cut away, even though we still have a lot of distractions, right? Like Zoom and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and I could just keep going. Netflix, Hulu. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things that we can distract ourselves with, but it would be a great shame to come out of this not a changed person when God is
Yeah.
clearly trying to call us in a deeper understanding and love of Him. Um, so another charge would be like eliminate distractions instead of putting on Netflix. Why don't you sit down and just be with God for a
Yeah.
little bit?
Yeah.
Why don't you actually let yourself feel something?
Mm-hmm.
Be quiet, right?
Yeah.
That was the last sermon. The last sermon was one of the applications was silence and solitude,
Mm-hmm.
which means kind of be quiet, sit with the Lord, and let Him speak and don't speak.
Yeah. Yeah. What
And
do you
people
do
are
in
like,
those
I
times?
don't even know what that looks like, to sit down and not think about something.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this time is going to be really fruitful, is just learning how to be still in a sense with the Lord. Like it says in Ezekiel, God speaks with a quiet, still voice.
Yeah.
Or that's one way. I'm not going to say He only speaks in a
Yeah.
quiet, still
Yeah.
voice, but how are we going to listen? How are we going to hear God's quiet, still voice when the chatter of life is just always around? We're always trying to fill ourselves with distractions. We're always trying to do these things. Um, we're always binge watching, right? And I'm not going to say I'm perfect at it all, because literally the other night I watched like 2 hours of The Office. Um, I just binge watched The Office. I'm like, it was nice. I'm not gonna lie. But could my time been spent better a little bit? Yeah, but I also don't think that every
Yeah.
every time you have to be like, I got to spend time with God.
Yeah.
Because God's still like, we can enjoy life
Yeah.
as
You can still
well.
enjoy life. Yeah.
You can still enjoy life as well, but if we're not having at least a moment,
Yeah.
try to carve out a moment in our day with the Lord to understand and just be with Him.
Yeah. I think in this time, it's one of those things where, there's a couple things. I mean, it's a good time of self-reflection,
Mm,
to see, to like you were talking about, on the community group the other day. It's like, what do you do? I forget what word you use, but during the time, like maybe at night right before you go to bed, like you're just scrolling on Facebook, or how are you using that time? And it's a moment. And even like family time, it's like, how
yeah,
often when you're at home with your family, is your face in your phone, or are you busy doing this and doing that, and just putting your kids in front of the TV or the iPad or something like that, so that they're not distracting you. And I know I was off work for 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks I was, it was nice because we did some projects, but actually we spent most of the time, um, doing like board games and stuff like that, and
mm,
just talking. And even now, kids are home all the time. Renee's home all the time. I go to work and I come home, and we still somehow find more time now. And I don't know if it's because we got used to it or what, but it seems like we're spending more time as a family now. And I feel fortunate to be in this situation. I know that when you look at the rest of the world, I think our other responsibility is to understand that there are people that are worried, people that are sick
yeah,
or know people that are sick, people that are sitting at home and they're just getting behind on their bills, and they don't know, they can't go, just get another job. And it's, some people are working, and they're kind of forced to work because they can't just quit. I mean, they have to be there, and it's there's a lot of people that are struggling during this time. And we as Christians, we need to, look at the world and try to, be that light, the encouragement, and see what we can do to help them, like you were talking about,
the
even in
salt and the
times
light.
like
Yeah,
this. Yeah. And I mean, it's I don't know. It may look different for different people on how they're going to do that, but I think if I know what we talked about the other day, in our community group too. It came up that, um, we as Christians need to approach this differently. Because if right now, I'm not going to get political at all, but if you look at politics and how it's
Yeah.
playing into this, even this situation is getting political where, one side is against the other, and it's just a constant battle between each other, and a blame game and this and that. And we
Yeah.
as the world, we kind of need to step, or not as the world, but as Christians need to step back and be separate from the world,
Yep.
and bring a hope, and bring a love and a compassion, and try to be different, in the way that we're reacting, and how we're acting in the world, and not get caught up in all that stuff, not get caught up in the fear. And I mean, I understand there will be fear for Christians who are facing this, but
Yeah.
still try
Yeah.
to, like, show a little bit more hope, and stay out of the political battle, and try to understand that God's in control.
Yeah.
Not the Republicans or Democrats. God's in control, not COVID-19. God's in control. Like, and
Oh
it's.
yeah, I agree. I think that there's so many different areas that people land on right now. There's just
Mhm,
so many. They're either, yeah, like you said, they're in fear, or they're playing, or they're feeding into this political
mhm.
mumbo jumbo, right?
Yeah,
Like just all the political stuff that's going on. They're either angry, right? They're
yeah,
angry about the situation. Um, and I think it's even more scandalous to say, where Scripture calls Christians to pray for your leaders, right? So,
mhm,
like, Donald Trump is the president, and people are like, "Man, I mean, it's extreme, right?"
yeah,
I don't want to get political either with it, but we also can't be the bystander either, right?
right. No, you're
Like,
right. Yeah,
we can't just be like, well, I don't want to do anything about this, or
for sure.
I'm not
Yeah,
gonna, but what's scandalous about it is we're called to pray for our leaders,
yeah,
and it's hard for people to do when they're like, I cannot stand that guy.
yeah,
I can't stand Donald Trump. I'm like, well, God calls you to pray for your
yeah.
leaders because he's
Exactly.
just as big a sinner as you.
Yeah,
You're not any better,
yeah,
and that's the issue too. As Christians, we're like, well, I'm a Christian, so I'm a little high. It's like, no, 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 no.
yeah,
Like you're not any better than the worst sinner,
yeah,
and we have to acknowledge that. And like, so for Christians, we're called to pray in behalf of the
yeah.
people we don't like. And I'm not saying I don't like him or not. I'm not going to make any comment on that,
Right.
but um, we're supposed to pray for our leaders because they're just as much sinners as us. Yes, the whole system's probably a little jacked up. I mean, we're all aware of
Yeah,
that. But we should be praying for it because
absolutely.
regardless where you land on Democratic or Republican or coronavirus is freaky or this is really stupid, right?
Yeah,
Like, doesn't matter where you land. You should be praying and having. We need to be different than how the world reacts.
yeah,
We're not, if you're a Christian, you're blasting Facebook about your political leaders.
yeah.
You should stop. You should
Exactly.
stop blasting,
Exactly.
and maybe start praying.
Yeah,
Instead of blasting other people for being fear of this COVID-19, you should be praying for them for
yeah,
courage. Instead of being angry with the people that are, angry about the COVID-19, they're like, this is dumb. You
yeah,
should be praying for them
yeah,
because they need a softer heart too. Because
yeah,
uh, I think the reality behind it is everyone's like, this is my opinion, and my opinion is law. My
yeah,
opinion is I determine what's right and I determine what's
yeah,
truth. It even says in Scripture, right, that the people decided what good and evil is within their own heart,
yeah.
right? That's what we do every day.
It's what, yeah, every day.
Every day we decide what's good and what's evil. And the reality is we're so jacked up, we're so
Yeah,
confused on what that actually means.
yeah,
Maybe the world would start changing if Christians would dedicate themselves in deep intercessory work, right? Prayer
yeah,
for our leaders, prayer for our brothers and sisters, prayer for our emotion. Maybe that's, you know, I'm just throwing out suggestion.
yeah,
maybe that'll be a sermon next week.
yeah,
Maybe that's how we change the world: is to stop raising our fists
yeah.
and maybe start getting down on our knees.
That's great. Yep. I agree. Yeah, I agree. So, well, I don't know. I think we've kind of gone all over, and it's been good. we, usually it's testimony. I mean, that's what it's been in the past and whatnot. And we
Yeah,
went
but
other
you got
ways.
me on it.
But you know what? I mean, like right now, there's everything is different right now in the like in our society. So, and this is a big topic, and this is something that everybody's in the world is one way or another dealing with this. So it's kind of a big topic, and it's good to talk about, bring this perspective to it. So I'm glad I came around to this. But
Yeah, yeah,
I
and
think,
testimony in it, and then
yeah,
you
uh,
also called me on this, so I
yeah. There's
ramble.
there's a lot. Well, there's a lot of good talk there. So, but yeah, I think I don't know. Do you have anything else to add, or is there anything else, or?
I have a lot to add, but for the sake of time, and
Yeah,
we've been on for an hour, which I think we did pretty good for an
I think
hour.
so too.
Um, I guess the last thing I would say, just encourage people that are listening to this to jump in on this. This is going to
Mm,
be a ministry led by Chris here, to move forward. We want to see more people come on this, talk about their testimony, but also about their struggles. I mean, we're in a time where
yeah.
um, I think that our testimony it definitely is within our struggles. So COVID-19 is,
Yes.
if that's something that people want to talk about on this too, I'm like, yeah, like go for
Yeah.
it. Go for it in like how God is changing
Yes.
your life during this time. And that's kind of the sermon series we're in right now, right? Is
Yeah.
such a time as this, and how do we be Christians,
Yeah.
and how do we love others right now? So my end would be, pray,
Yeah.
pray, seek the Lord, and seek fellowship, regardless on what that looks like right now.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I know on the previous episodes and stuff, we sometimes have people come on and they just shared what God was doing in their life, like a testimony, like a current testimony. So whatever your testimony is, whatever you want to share, what God has done in your life, what He's doing in your life, um, this is an important way of communication, is telling people your story. Because I mean, you can sit there and try to read scripture to somebody and tell them, this is how it is. But if they don't believe the Bible, then they don't care. They're probably not even listening.
Yeah,
But if you tell them your story and it's true and it's from your heart and it's what has happened to you, nobody can tell you your story is not your story, or it didn't happen to you.
yeah, exactly.
And your experiences. So I really enjoyed doing this before, and and a lot of good things came out of it, and I'm looking forward to doing it again, and doing it in a new format. So this is exciting for me, and I'm looking forward to hear your guys' stories and what God's doing in your guys' life. And it's really a ministry for two people. It's meant for anybody, but I'm thinking that Christians, it's good to come on here and just get the encouragement, and you get to
Mm,
know people that you get to hear a story that you may not have heard before. You get to know them a little bit more, and then and it's a little bit, and also it could help you relate to somebody else that maybe you've been trying to talk to and witness to, but you can't relate. And then you hear somebody that comes on the podcast and they have a story that's just like the person that you're talking to, and then now it gives you a way to relate to them, even something to share, a resource to share with them. And then also, it's for people who are not a Christian, and whether you're curious, or you're searching, or you're thinking about it, it gives you a chance to hear what God has done in other people's lives. So it's an outreach, and it's also a useful ministry tool for Christians and stuff. So encouragement, everything. So yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I'm excited about it, and
Amen,
looking
brother.
forward to hearing from more people out there, and seeing what you guys, hearing what God's doing in your guys' life. So yeah.
Amen. Amen.
All
Kill it.
right.
Mic
Well,
drop.
yeah. Well, I think with that, then we'll wrap it up there, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, you guys take it easy.
All right.